Now we are going to study what's the meaning of the sign of displacement and what does the change of absolute value of displacement means. Okay, so let's focus on the sign of the displacement. So the sign of the displacement can be positive or negative. We are talking about the x component of displacement here. So we are not talking about the magnitude. If its magnitude is always positive, magnitude of a vector always positive. But here I'm talking about the x component of displacement. So it's the sx, s with a subscript x. Okay, so if you see a negative sign here, what does it mean? If your initial position is xi or initial position is here, if you manage to get a positive sign, okay, let's start with positive sign. If you get a positive sign, what does it mean? It means your xf will be greater than xi, right? Xf must be greater than xi. Only when you minus it, you get a positive answer, right? So that means xf is larger. Xf is larger. What does it mean? It means you are on the positive side of the initial position. Only you can get larger number, right? You're on the positive side of the initial position. Okay. If you get a negative sign, what does it mean? If you get a negative sign, then it means you are on the negative side of the initial position. Negative side technically in this situation means on the left side of the initial position. And positive side of the initial position means you are on the right hand side of the initial position. Okay, so that's for sign. Let's talk about the absolute value. So if the absolute value increases with time, means that if we look at just this value here, and this value is getting larger and larger, 8, 9, 10, 11. So what is happening? If it's getting larger, it means the distance between the final position and the initial position is getting larger, right? Because the distance between them gets larger, and this value here become larger. Okay, so if it gets larger, it means it's moving away. Moving away only will get larger, right? So the final position is getting further and further away from the initial position. That's where the absolute value increase with time. But if the absolute value decreases with time, then it means that the distance between the final position and the initial position is getting nearer. So you can think of it as the object here is approaching or moving towards the initial position. If you're moving towards the initial position, of course the distance between the initial and final will be smaller. So it decreases with time. So it's moving towards the initial position. Okay, so since we have known that the meaning behind positive sign, negative sign, increasing with time and decreasing with time, let's try to study what does it mean when the displacement is positive and it's increasing with time. Okay, if the displacement is positive, it means the displacement is happening towards the right hand side. And if it's increasing in time, means by the displacement vector is getting longer and longer. So if I would like to illustrate it, it will be something like this. It starts short, then it becomes longer. Pointing to the right means it's positive sign. Okay, because the final position is at the positive side of the initial position. So of course the displacement is to the right, because the final is at the right, so the displacement will be towards the right. Then increasing with time, as you can see, the arrow gets longer and longer. So if we trace the arrow tip here, we follow the arrow tip, you can see that the arrow tip gets moving this direction. So what does it mean? It means our object is actually moving towards the positive x direction. Okay, so when the x component of displacement is positive and increasing with time, it means that the object is moving in the x direction, positive x direction, sorry. Okay, and if the displacement is positive but decreasing with time, then it will be something like this. The arrows get shorter, but it is still pointing to the right. Because the sign is positive, it's pointing to the right. But because the absolute value is decreasing with time, the length of the displacement vector gets shorter and shorter. again. So it will be getting shorter and shorter with time. So if you trace the arrow tip, you can see that it's going this way, right? So that means our object is going this way. So going this way is moving in the negative x direction. So if you see the displacement to be positive, but it's decreasing with time, going from 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, yeah, decreasing with time, the absolute value decreasing with time, it means it's moving in the negative x direction. Okay, move on to negative sign. If it's a negative sign, then it means the displacement is pointing towards left direction or the negative x direction. So the displacement is pointing towards the left, so our arrow will be flip direction. Then if it's increasing in time, then it will be getting longer and longer, right? Pointing to the left, getting longer and longer. So if you trace the arrow tip, you see that it's actually moving to the left, and moving to the left is the negative x direction. Okay, so if you see negative and you see the absolute value is decreasing with time, that means it's pointing to the left, but the displacement vector is getting shorter and shorter, just like this, getting shorter and shorter. And if you trace the arrow tip, you can see that the object is actually moving towards the initial position. Then it's moving in the positive x direction. Okay, it's moving towards the right, right? When it's moving towards the right, that means it's positive x direction. Okay, even though the position is at the negative side, we are looking at what's the direction of motion. The direction of motion is towards the positive x direction, so therefore it's moving in the positive x direction. Okay, so by knowing the sign of the x component of displacement, and by knowing how the absolute value changes with time, we are able to determine whether the object is moving in the positive x direction or negative x direction. And of course, this is the same thing for the y-axis, y dimension as well.